There we go. We started when rates were locked in, and I think we all remember that. Rates either had to be approved by the homeowner, we had to contract rates with OTAs, and we were pretty much stuck. When you contracted those rates, that's what they were, and you had to go with it. The next way, another way that we tried that was just a flat overall increase from last year's rates. So we would say, okay, well, we want to make 5% more this year, so we would just increase everything 5%. But since your inventory varies, that's not really, a one-size-fits-all doesn't really fit. And it's way too random, and it's only what we wanted. It didn't really reflect any consumer demand. Looking forward to historical performance. The third method was historical performance. But, as my favorite movie says, we're not in Kansas anymore, especially after COVID. Length of stay keeps kind of fluctuating all over the place. There's pent-up demand, and the reasons for staying have changed. They're not necessarily coming on fun vacation. They might just be coming to work or things of that nature. So these three methods, the way we used to do it, just don't cut it anymore in the marketplace. Change is the only constant, and if anything that we have learned over the past 18 months, if not longer, is that is the only thing we can really count on, is that things are always going to be changing, and we need to evolve your business practices so that you are changing. Looking forward, the future's right now. So right now, you need to be proactive. You need to figure out what length of stay can you afford. I see a lot of property managers that are just nice guys, and turn out they take a shorter stay, and after you do the math, they've actually paid that guest to stay with them. So it's nice to be the nice guy, but we are in business to make money, not to spend it. To spend it on our guests, rather. There's also homeowner input is really important. I think the homeowner relationship between the property manager and the homeowner needs to be just that. It needs to be a partnership where we work together. They have hired you because you're a professional vacation rental manager. So you're the one with the knowledge. That's not to say that we are saying, okay, homeowner, what do you want to do? We're not doing that. But what is their comfort, their threshold comfort? What is the minimum price that they're willing to take so that we don't go below that and upset anyone? Next, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew or Tyler. Who's up next?
Yeah, probably between us.
All right.
Yeah, we'll see based off the slides. I don't remember.
It's a little bit. So before we jump in more, I'm Andrew McConnell. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Rented. We started off doing revenue management for thousands of properties for property managers, using other pricing tools, and then seeing what worked and didn't. We decided to build our own ART, our automated rate tool, in partnership with Key Data, just seeing the importance of having real reservation level data on top of what you're seeing on scrape data as well.
Yeah, and I'm Tyler Ashby with Key Data, and we're a business intelligence tool. So we feed in your data, and then we help to provide insights for you to make smarter decisions about the inventory that you have, whether it's for revenue management purposes, marketing, or operations. And Shelly glossed over it, but she is a revenue manager that has been in this space for a long time. She's a great professional and partner to work with. Am I missing anything?
Yes, I did forget that part. Yes.
We're not just three random people up here talking about this, I guess is the point.
Yes, I've worked for vacation rental companies for over 20 years, and setting rates. I don't know if anybody remembers, but I have used a humongous spreadsheet to figure out all my date ranges and all my rates, and then I had to go in and load them all, and it was the worst time of the year for me ever in my career. So having these pricing tools and the data easily accessible has been really fabulous, and now I'm a revenue manager, and trust me, if you're doing seasonal rates, stop.
I mean, it's still a
Stop.
thing, right? I
Yes.
mean, raise your hand. I mean, you may have just recently switched over the past couple of years to looking at your rates in a different way, right? Weekly or daily, as opposed to the summer season. I can think back to 4 or 5 years ago. I was still doing, all right, this is our summer season. It's 12 weeks, and then I've got 2 shoulder weeks, and that's a discount of a certain percentage. And that's how we price the whole year. And then, in August or September, we wouldn't even have rates for the next year until then, and we would set them all at once. I mean, so this is not a long trajectory, right? This is really coming at you fast. So that's why we wanted to do a presentation about it.
Yeah, and I guess maybe a question for those here, because it was presented like there were these clear, 3 or 4 distinct phases that we've moved past, but that's not necessarily true for every market. In North Carolina, you kind of have to have sign off from the owner. So how many here have to agree rates with their owners before the year prior? Does anybody still have to do that? Right. So they'll just set a floor, but they're not setting, oh, in the summer, here's all I'm willing to take.
I think that's how we've had it for like the past 20 years. And now we're kind of hearing what hotels do with
Right.
embedded ADR for, a week. You have that, that might be 130, that's Monday, Tuesday, and then it goes up.
Right. Friday night's not the same as Tuesday. Yeah. Especially based on availability. Yeah, and I think this is where, kind of looking back, and especially with COVID, when everything was increasing, right, it was going up 3 to 5% a year, it was easy to think that whatever you're doing is working, because you're saying, look, I made more revenue than the year before. But what that doesn't take into account, and I think this is where something like Key Data is really impactful, is what you could have been making. So the assumption was, because it's more than last year, we did it great. Well, how much did you actually leave on the table? And being able to benchmark against your market, against your competitive set, is incredibly impactful. Not to just get a sense of where you are, but also, back to Shelley's point on the partnership with homeowners, to be able to educate and have those conversations with the homeowners too. And so I think we'll jump into more of that. We'll just see which slides come up.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
I see what you're talking about. All right, so I think when we talk about revenue management, 90+% of the sessions in the conversation is around pricing. But that is only one piece of revenue management. Revenue management is really about having the right inventory in the right place in front of the right guests at the right price. And so when you're thinking about what you're doing on revenue management, you really need to think about, what are guests searching for? What are the types of properties based on the time of year, for the lengths of stays, with the kinds of amenities they're looking for. And this is going to come into play on your homeowner acquisition strategy. This is going to come into play on your distribution strategy. Where do you need those homes to be listed? And then certainly this is going to come into play on what price you end up setting for that. And so we're going to dive into these different components. I think this is...
Yeah, this is another one that I really liked, because we can look at all these numbers and all the data that Key Data provides, but it's about what you actually see in that data and how you move forward with it from there.
Yeah, so this is an example from a product that we offer, and it's called Demand IQ. But essentially, it's your Google Analytics on steroids. It's built directly for vacation rental companies, and so essentially, what we're doing is we're looking at the dates that people are inquiring in your site about, that they're getting a quote for. And then we're showing it back to you and giving you some insights, right? Is this an emerging week of demand that you should be paying attention to right now? Are there any places in your website where you're showing somebody 0 results? This is something that we didn't know would happen until we got into building this product and then had a beta test. But it's amazing, we talk about demand for pricing, but as Andrew was saying, demand has to do with having the right, bedroom size or right amenity available to the guest. And so often we tell our guests, no, we don't have what you want. You need to go look somewhere else, right? We give them a 0 result, whether it's by date or by amenity that they're looking for. And so a product like this can help you to identify areas of demand that's coming from your website.
Is that from one property manager's, it's just their data?
Yeah, so this is one property manager. Of course, I blurred out their name here, but this is something that we see that's very, very familiar. So these are the dates that are kind of our hot dates, and then the length of stay that people are looking for, and then the results that are associated. This is one of about 7 screens in the platform, but it allows you to say, all right, who's looking for 6-night stays versus 7-night stays? And what we found that's really amazing is if we had a 7-night minimum here, only 165 people were looking for that. 241 were looking for 4-night stays. And so this takes into account what's that demand, and should I offer a 4-night stay but maybe raise the price, charge a premium, maybe even charge the 7-night price for a 4-night stay. But what we find is that what we might have thought, right, our perception of what the demand was may not actually be the case.
Right. You get people say, my market is a 7-night market. Well, if that's all you allow people to book, that's all you're seeing is what came through. You're not seeing maybe the 85% of search that you paid for, whether it was on AdWords or whatever, that didn't convert because when they searched, they got 0 results. And the 0 results could also be you don't have any availability anymore. So this isn't just necessarily around length of stay or parameters, but also thinking through how you show results. Because if you have properties available for adjacent weeks, you say, hey, we don't necessarily have this week, but let me show you these beautiful homes or this home that's available if you come a day later. And so thinking about some flexibility on that side to really open up what you can offer.
Yeah, we start to talk about how do you merchandise on your website, right? So maybe a good example is, you go into a department store and you want some acid wash jeans. Those are so cool, right? And so you go in and you're like, man, there's none here. I absolutely wanted these. And you go up to a salesperson and say, hey, do you have any of those? They're so cool. Everybody wants them. And they say, sorry, you need to go shop somewhere else. It's like you didn't even try and sell me anything else, We don't have acid wash, but we got these other ones that are very similar. We do that a lot in our websites and we don't realize it, where we basically tell the guest, I know you wanted this. We're tracking that you want this, but we don't have it, so go somewhere else. And so if we're aware of it, we can often then, make a decision to change it.
And not just necessarily on our own site, so through the OTAs as well. If you see a lot of people looking at in my market, at my properties, want 3 nights, but I'm pushing out 4 or 5-night minimums on my site plus the OTAs, I'm losing all those search results. I'm not showing up at all there either. So it's not just about your own site, but that's where obviously you're going to have the best data. So then the question with demand-based pricing is, what metrics are we actually looking at? And for us, the booking window is incredibly important, and it's dynamic, right? The booking window from 2017 is not what we saw in 2020, is not what we saw in 2021. Still a little bit open question on some dates in 2022. But knowing when you should be holding rates and maybe pushing them up when you're outside that booking window, or once that booking window is passed, right? If you have a larger property, booking 90 to 120 days out, and you're 40 days out, you're probably going to take a pretty different pricing strategy on those last 40 days, that last month, as you're getting in. Length of stay, this one we'll get further on to. I think Tyler has some good slides on it. But I think this is much bigger than people realize. Back to how we historically did it is how we've always done it. And so people think, oh, it's a 5-night market, it's a 7-night market. Look at the data. Is it actually a 5 and 7-night market, or are you just forcing your own clients into that box? Pacing. So this is pacing and pickup. This is especially important to see if you are pricing right. So if you see certain properties booking way too fast, filling up, 1 week they got way more bookings than every other property, you probably underprice that. You should probably need to go in and look at, hey, what do we do to make this such a bargain that everybody's booking it? Or on the flip side, are there properties that are lagging behind the rest of your portfolio? And that's not always around price, right? You can go in and say, the price is totally right, but I got this 3-star review I haven't responded to. And that's really dinging me on search results or other things. So again, this revenue management's not all about pricing. Pricing is a big component, but there are a lot of others. And then this isn't just for your individual property, but looking at your market overall and your competitive set. So what 4 bedrooms with similar amenities in my market, what are their average daily rates? What's their occupancy look like? And then the biggest kind of trailing metric to see how you performed, what the real scorecard is RevPAN or RevPAR, revenue per available room. So this is something Jason and Kidada and Cliff kind of came up with, which is adjusted. So in hotels, revenue per available room is just 365 nights because you have all nights you can book. In vacation rentals, the owner may take 4 weeks out. Should you get dinged for the fact that you only had 48 weeks to rent, not 52? We don't think so. So we say strip out owner holds, maintenance, anything like that, and just look at the nights you had available to actually book and how you performed on those. And that's the most objective way to track it.
Yeah, so we'll start with length of stay. And this is a screen grab from a client's dashboard. But essentially what we're looking at is the average length of stay for 9/1 through 9/30. And the orange line is the occupancy, right? Or, excuse me, the adjusted occupancy. So again, adjusted means we're taking out those owner nights or maintenance blocks. So it's really how booked am I out of the nights that I actually had available to book. And of course, we've got Labor Day down here. And then I circled the Saturdays for us because as we were talking about earlier, right, holidays and then the weekends, right, can be pretty popular. And in looking at this, and you could go back and look at 2020, you could go back and look at 2019, 2018, some more regular years, but we can see how these two key performance indicators are corresponding to each other, right? As the demand goes up, right, or our occupancy goes up, our length of stay is increasing. And so while this client may not have a longer length of stay, we can see what the guest demand is by doing this exercise, right? So we can see that not just the little holiday, but also on those Saturdays. And so this kind of leads you down a path of what decisions could we be making about how we merchandise our units or maybe restrictions that we put in place or remove to really take advantage of that increased demand and the length of stay that follows along with it.
How many people have variable minimum stay requirements? Is it mostly between weekend, weekday, or is it time of year? What are you varying it on?
Ours is time of year.
Okay.
So sometimes there's 3 nights or 5 nights.
Okay. Right. How about?
Weekends mainly.
Okay. And then,
Time of year.
time of year?
We also do ours on the sides of the house.
Okay.
We obviously don't want a luxury home for just 2 nights, and cleaning on that is going to be more substantial than a 2-bedroom home. So we really focus on that as well. And homeowners who have preference.
You're right. I'm kind of back to where Shelley started with some of this. Do you know your hurdle rates on a either per night or per booking basis per home? Of like, here's our break even to know how to price?
Not on the top of my head, but
Okay.
if I had the numbers in front of me, I know what we would need to for those dates.
Yeah.
That's when like we can play around with discounts. If someone wants something, we can take this damage waiver off, this other fee off, or something like that to get them down there and still break even.
Okay. Great.
I think it's really interesting to hear. A follow-up question to that would be, how firm are you on those length of stay restrictions? I know from running a company, we'd be like, nope, it's 7 nights in the summer, no matter what. And then, 60 days prior to arrival, we'd say, it is 6 nights in the summer, no matter what, until it was down to 3. And so I sometimes wonder if we had been more intelligent about charging the right price for the guests that wanted that 3-night stay or 4-night stay from the beginning, could I then have double dipped, right? Could I have gotten the 3-night stay at a premium, or maybe even the same price that I would have gotten for a 6-night stay, and then filled in that gap as I got closer, instead of holding so firm on those rules and then ending up giving it away anyhow, on top of all the discounts that I had then provided at that point. Because at the 60-day mark, not only was the length of stay going down, but now toss a 10% discount on top of it. Now do a hard mark on it. Now, you know. And so I think if I had had a tool like this to use, I could have said, or, you know, a pricing partner to work with, I could say, you know, let's be more intelligent about these decisions ahead of time.
Yeah, and combine it with knowing your operational costs and hurdle rates as well, of course.
So now we're looking at booking window, which I have to tell you, I think is so exciting, and it's really hard to kind of pull out of your property management software pretty often. But if you know your booking window, it kind of answers a lot of questions for you. Whenever I work with clients, and I'm sure, Shelley, you get the same thing, they often say, well, how do I know if I'm on track or not? You know, we can look at pacing, but if we look at booking windows, right, historical booking windows, things that are actualized, we can understand where we should be at different points. So we often set up some guideposts and say, all right, at 100 days out, this is where we know that historically you've been. And so, you know, if we're going to try a new strategy, a new pricing strategy, and we're concerned, if we get to that 100-day mark and you don't feel like you're where you should be, that'd be the time to make a change, right? If you're not 25% booked by that point, you need to make an adjustment. So what we're looking at here, we're looking at the blue line is your occupancy. The orange line is your booking window. And we can see that whenever the demand is shorter, the booking window is shorter. When the demand is higher and we're more booked, the booking window is longer, right? So demand really has a lot to do with how far out people are going to have to make their reservation. They know there's going to be scarcity. If I don't make my reservations 143 days prior to the arrival date, I'm not going to be able to find my property. So these work in unison with each other, right? As occupancy is going to peak, that booking window is going to be longer and longer.
How many people over the last kind of 12 to 18 months saw a serious yo-yo of this, where it completely compressed, and then because nobody could find something summer 2020, it got super elongated for summer 2021, and then now we're in short again, right? So it's all of this, you can kind of look in the back, but you have to stay on top of what's happening today too, because it is changing real time. It's crazy.
Yeah, Shelley, do you work with people on, I always tell people, like, you know, you've got to have two strategies running at once, right? You've got to have like your Coca-Cola Classic strategy, and then you've got to have like your Coke Zero strategy, which are like your short-term kind of emergency strategy and your longer normal strategy. Like, you've got to be prepared for both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also goes back to the length of stay discussion. You brought up a really good point that it depends on the size of the property. But to say that everything, again, it says there is no one size fits all. To say that this week is going to be 6 nights, no matter what, is not realistic. You may want to have some of your inventory have a 4-night minimum and be flexible in that way so that you always have something to offer whomever is looking.
And I'll tell you, just from a practical standpoint, not only can you make more money if done properly, you can also alleviate a lot of operational headaches by spreading out your turns and things like that.
Well, the other piece there is the danger of averages, right? If you have a bunch of 2-bedroom condos and then 5 and 6 bedroom homes, one may have a booking window of 150, the other of 2 night or of 50, and then the average is 100. So you totally misplay on both. So really start looking at them in specific groupings that make sense, that are like one another.
Sure. Booking window by market. So, you know, just as, looks like I might have missed adding a little text there. Just as Andrew was saying, you know, it's important to segment. When we think about segmenting by, you know, location or building or size, understanding what's happening in your market within a segment is important as well. So in this, we're looking at the company's performance. That's going to be the solid line, or excuse me, this is just the market. So we're looking at 1 year over the other. Something that's unique in Key Data is that we can show you market performance, so direct source market performance as well. And you can compare yourself to that market as well. In this, we're really looking at 1 year over another, right? And so how has the booking window changed in 2021 compared with 2020? And we can see that it's nearly doubled in length in June compared with the year before in this market. But that's why it's so important to pay attention to not only kind of what you're seeing as your trend, but also kind of what's happening in the market, because we know that 2020 was a crazy year. 2021 has also been kind of crazy on the opposite end, right? I mean, I talk to people every day that say, man, I'm having kind of my best year ever. And so we don't know what's going to happen next year. I'm sure it'll be fantastic as well. But having something like this, you can pay attention to it. Yeah.
Dawn.
Is that report in your regular Key Data?
Yeah. So this is called the benchmarking report. I just pulled the company out. That's why we've got that blank spot right there. I guess I decided we didn't want to show theirs. But in the market here, you would normally compare yourself to the market performance.
And again, you could filter it like, oh, well, only my 4 bedrooms versus their 4 bedrooms, so you're not blending everything together.
Right.
And besides just seeing how the market's doing, there are 2 other, I think, really powerful uses for this. One is for new owner or owner retention. If you're ahead of market, show, hey, here's why you want to come with me. I'm consistently 15% above market. Even when the market was down this much, I was only down this much, so I was still, my gap to market was this. The other piece is if you're doing tests, right? So you have a stabilized business, you can see how you track against market for a period of time and say, okay, now we want to try X. And then try X for a period and say, how did that change how I compare it against market? So it's a really good way to benchmark how you're doing when you're trying new things in your business, which hopefully you're always doing.
Pacing. So we spend a lot of time talking about pacing, especially if you've been in business for several years, you have a lot of great historical data, and maybe 2020 isn't something that you want to pace against. But if you've got the ability to easily pace against 2019 or 2018, it can be pretty powerful. In this slide, we're looking at pacing for Thanksgiving specifically. So the solid line is this year. The next dotted line down is last year, and then 2019 below. And really what I wanted to point out here is that even if you're experiencing huge growth, right? If you're experiencing pacing that's far exceeding, and you're saying, look, I'm raising the price, I can't figure out how to press the brakes a little bit. It feels like it's going too quickly. You can still use pacing, because what's so interesting is that the trend is the same. As we look across each of these months, weeks, we've got a few weeks that are a little bit strange. A lot of that can be associated with when the holiday falls and that sort of thing. But what we notice is that the percent differences here are kind of the same as we move across. So you can start to identify trend out of a report like this. Even though you're pacing ahead, you can start to say, well, my trend is to be 5 points ahead by this time, or whatever that is. And you can use a report like this. Occupancy or ADR. So what's driving your RevPAR? This is a great conversation. Andrew and Shelley, I'm sure, both have a lot of insight here. But we talk about RevPAR, and sometimes people glaze over a bit. I know we're in a really bright room right now, but there's always something that's got to be driving RevPAR. There are 2 levers, right? Price and occupancy, right? So they work in inverse of one another. When price goes up, we often sacrifice occupancy. When price goes down, we may leave money on the table, right? We're over-occupied. And so in this example, we're looking at RevPAR 2021 versus 2020. And what we would ask ourselves is, RevPAR is a huge increase here, but what's driving that? Is it because we've, been so occupied, we're 100% occupied, and that's what's driving up this RevPAR? Or is it a mix of both, or does it lay steadily at the feet of rate?
Well, and the other thing particular to vacation rentals is you're maxed at 100%. With software, you can sell infinite. With physical products, you can just go make more. But there are no more than 365 days available in any given home. So once you hit that 100%, you can't do anything more. And so really playing with, this is where ADR is very important as you're playing with that RevPAR target.
And then this one is pickup. And so hotels use pickup all the time. We have Gabby in the room here with us today. She's a partner advocate, partner success manager with Key Data. She came straight from hotels. She was a revenue director for Kimpton. And she was like, man, why aren't you guys looking at pickup? You can do this by clicking these 3 buttons. And we said, wow, Gabby, you've already paid for yourself in just that one comment. So we started looking at it, and it really can be helpful. So essentially what we're saying is, let's do 2 lines on a graph, and we'll say one of them is as of a week ago, and one of them is today. And then we can start to identify the pickup. And when you segment and look by building or by bedroom or by neighborhood, you can start to identify what's picking up and what's not. And so it can be really useful in a lot of different areas, but I especially like it in kind of testing, right? If we do a marketing campaign, did we get pickup from that? If we did a rate adjustment, did that provide pickup? And in this one, we can see the Thanksgiving growth. This is 1 week apart, or excuse me.
1 month.
1 month apart, yeah. And we can see the pickup that occurred. It lets you know, like, these weeks right here, yeah, we're getting a little bit of pickup, but not much. Should we focus a lot of time there? Maybe not as much. We can see that in the shorter term, we've got pickup. And if I'm out here looking at December 4th and December 11th, I would not waste my time on that right now. It's just not, there's no demand for it, right? We've really got to focus where we can make an impactful difference.
Well, and this is where kind of pairing it with something like Demand IQ to really see, is there no demand there, right? What are the searches, and is it they're searching and I'm not showing the right thing, or people just aren't ready to book? They're searching. I know it's there. They're just not ready to book. Yeah, so data is not all that important. It's what you do with the data, right? Back to Shelley, what you see, and then more importantly, what you do.
So going forward into the next steps, focus on what really matters. Be very tactical on how you are, have a plan what you're going for, and be tactical on how you're going to reach that. Back to the conversation with homeowners, you need to be sure you have contractual pricing power. So check your owner contracts and make sure that you do have that power because you are the professional manager. Understand your market. Look at the market data. I often also just do a little VRBO search, or every now and then if I'm, really need to look and see what's going on. What is that looking like? And then, of course, focus on and track the right KPIs. Key Data also has a ton of KPIs.
Too many, right? It's overload.
It's hard for them to be key if there are more than 100. Right?
Right.
So what are the ones that actually matter?
Absolutely, and it's occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR. And, I've heard this in many other sessions, particularly referring to the use of pricing tools. You've got to monitor it and make little adjustments and tweaks as you go. Pricing tools are fantastic, but that doesn't take the job off your plate. So you still need to pay attention and adjust, again, depending on, based on what the demand is, not just what you would like for it to be.
Just going back to the contractual pricing power, does anybody have issues with owners giving them free reign? Well, just set. So this is where data can be really helpful in those conversations because you respect it, right? You give it to them. And then taking information like this, or these are reports we run as well, of saying, hey, here's the performance on all the properties that gave us free reign. You know, here's how much more they brought versus yours. And then it's a much easier conversation.
Those two that I'm thinking of are somewhat amateur. Their homes are more sentimental. It's
Okay.
about money.
Yeah, so it might not move the needle for them. The other one we've run into is people coming back and say, well, my minimum rate needs to be this. I say, okay, well, just so you know, last year that would have cost $17,000, right? This is the number of bookings you would have missed if that had been your minimum rate, because here's how many bookings you had below that. So just being able at your fingertips to pull that kind of data really helps with those kinds of conversations.
And I think that's what most people get. I mean, when I was managing properties, I would often get the homeowner that would say, I don't want anything less than this. It's not worth it to me, you know. But that would also be the same homeowner that would come at the end of the year and say, why didn't we make X amount of dollars? Well, it takes all types in order to get there. And I think that's a great point you make, Andrew, that being able to show, even if it's a new home to your property or to your program, right? You don't have historical performance. You can pick a home that's similar and say, well, 15% of reservations were under that price, and it equated to this much money. We also offer in Key Data a report called Owner Missed Opportunity. It's not exact, right? It looks at the dates that owners took and the ADR at that time and does a calculation, which can be really, really beneficial if you've got an owner that unfortunately likes those peak times, but then has an issue with how much they made at the end of the year.
Yeah, a prior business I had, we would do lease arb. And so we had this triplex down in Destin. It was going to be $110,000 for the year. And a guy came back and said, oh, I want this weekend around July 2nd, which of course was July 4th weekend, because his daughter wanted to do her bachelorette party. I said, okay, that's fine. It'll be $100,000. He said, she can go to Vegas.
Well, and keeping in mind too, to your point about those, I don't want to go below this. Well, in your lower demand times, you might, let's say, go below that, but then your higher demand times, you're going to be taking much more. So it really kind of balances it out. I mean, having a minimum rate certainly kind of dictates what kind of guest you're going to get. If you go too low, party time. So, it's another way to think about it too, not just on a reservation by reservations basis, but, as the year, how is that property performing? And are we staying in that range that they're comfortable with? And probably.
Well, and the fluctuation. This is one thing Don and I were talking about yesterday. On the OTAs, they actually reward properties that change rates more. Mm-hmm. So you'll see a rate just change $1 or $2, and that's not because that's a better pricing necessarily. It's just because the search algorithm on Airbnb or Vrbo says, oh, rates or properties that do that, we're going to push up because that shows they're more actively managed. So there are these certain tricks that may not impact revenue on the per night basis, but do based on where they end up on search results and thus get booked. I think this may be it from us. Are there kind of questions or?
Questions?
Don.
So what do you do in an area that you don't have a lot of data coming from?
Sure, yeah.
How do you, or with your pricing tool also, you don't have a lot of comparable properties?
Yeah, I think we have slightly different answers on that because of how they work versus how we work. So how we work with run it with our pricing tool and coming up with the data for competitive markets and competitive sets, it's a spiraling out geographic radius. So at a per property basis, saying beds, baths, and amenities that matter for that market, and then saying how far out do we need to go? Is it a quarter mile because there's so much density? Is it 25 miles because there's not as much density? To get a statistically relevant set to comp it against. And then that creates a seasonality curve and it kind of gets in the range of the base rate that's going to plug on that seasonality curve. But then that's where, what Shelley was saying, monitoring yourself and really knowing your market, going and tweaking and say, oh, well, this one just put in a new kitchen 6 months ago, or this one hasn't upgraded in 6 years. They need to slide slightly this way. And where they should sit on that curve. But that's how we do it with our pricing. and then key data.
And since key data doesn't suggest any pricing to you, right? We're an analytical tool. We collect data two ways, right? So from our clients, and then we aggregate that up to the market level. And the market depends on where you're at, right? If you're in an area that's really, really dense with vacation rentals, a market could be a building, or it could be a couple of blocks. And then we would have a larger market that you could look at and participate in. But in an area, let's say along the Oregon coast, that's one market for us. And so we have rules built into our system to keep it anonymous, right? We have to have a certain number of participants, but it works more like a cooperative, right? You're sharing your data with the community, and in return, the community is sharing that aggregated data back to you. The second way that we collect data, so if we don't have enough clients in your market, we do scrape the Airbnb and Vrbo sites for that data as well that you can use in your dashboard.
So in key data, you can set your comp sets. You can put your four-bedroom houses or your houses with these certain amenities. Do the pricing tools take any of that into consideration? Or do they all follow that same?
Yeah, so I can't speak to the other ones. So it rented, each property has its own competitive set, and that's going to be based on beds, baths, and then amenities. And the ones that really move price are oceanfront, beachfront, ski in, ski out, pool, or a hot tub jacuzzi. Right? It's grouping on that, and then as close geographically as possible until you get to that statistically relevant number. So, like Tyler was saying, if there's a huge density, and so there's all this data in a building or in a block, the comp set's very tight because it's right there. If it's a neighborhood full of 5-bedroom with pool, I don't know if there are a ton of those markets, then it's just that neighborhood. But if it's a more sparsely populated area, more sparsely rented area, you're having to go further and further out to get the 20, 25, sometimes 400 that you need to get that statistically significant number to inform what the curve should be and how to adjust. So that's not just to come up with the original pricing, right? It's also to react to the demand to update pricing. So back of, okay, we know the booking window is 120 days, we're 140 days out, and your competitive set is 89% booked, we need to start jacking up rates pretty significantly. Or we're 30 days out, and it's only 42% booked, we may need to play a little down with rates. And so it's reacting to ADR and occupancy for that property's competitive set.
We have, like some of our larger properties, we know are going to fill up way ahead of our 2-bedroom condos that might fill up last minute.
Right. Yeah, and so it's not going to be for your company, here's the curve. It's at a per property basis. Here's what the curve is, and then how each one's treated.
Any other questions? No? Well, thank you for sticking around with us. I know that after lunch on the last day, it's not the most fun.
So we did lots of data with very small writing on slides. So you know how to keep it really engaging. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you.
Tyler.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.